Hello and welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. Stanley Aryanto is an award-winning travel and landscape photographer who's explored 29 countries worldwide. He's won over 100 international awards and been published in magazines like Canadian Geographic and exhibited in countries like Australia, US and Japan. To Stanley, a photograph is more than just an image. It's a translation of what you see and experience in our passage in time. It transforms the feeling from the past to the present. It touches our imagination and conveys a story. Stanley has his own podcast, The Art of Photography, and owns The Wicked Hunt, a photography company that helps to inspire people to get outdoors and take great photos. We talk about how his style has developed, how his upbringing shaped his philosophy towards photography, along with a whole lot more. I hope you enjoy the show. G'day, Stanley. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
Hey, g'day, Grant. It's good to be here. I'm good. I'm just back here in Perth for since 2019, so it's been a good while.
Wow. Yeah. So what were you doing in Bali? You got stuck there during the pandemic, I assume?
Yes and no. I mean, in 2018, I kind of left my career as a mechanical engineer to pursue, travel and photography.
Sure.
And I flew to Canada and stayed there for 2.5 years under international experience. I think they call it, something fancy like that, but it's essentially it's a working holiday visa. So yeah, that was incredible because I get to explore the Canadian Rockies and I get to learn a whole bunch of adventures, like backcountry snowboarding, avalanche training, and so forth.
Awesome.
So towards the end of that time there, I had to go back. Now that was during the COVID era. So going back to Australia was like $6,000 worth of one trip. That's not including the isolation, which another $2,000 on top.
Wow.
And my grandma was getting old at that time. She was 98 at that time, and I decided I want to go back to Indonesia, not only because it's cheaper, but also to visit her because,
Sure.
I don't know when else I'm going to be able to visit.
Yeah.
Yeah. how long we got locked out here in Australia, right?
Exactly.
Which was a really good decision because, earlier this year she passed away. So I get to spend my last, her last year, with me, and that's great. So yeah, that's a little bit of story. So I'm kind of just settling myself there for now. I'm not sure when I'm gonna start traveling again, whether I'm gonna make Bali as the base, but I'm pretty much nomadic. I live off my luggage. I don't need anything else apart from my luggages. My luggage, my backpack, and my laptop bag, and that's pretty much it.
Wow. Okay. So talk to me, why have you got this passion for getting out into the world and traveling around, and why become a nomad, and why landscape photography is part of that?
Yeah,
is it the nomadic life that attracts you, or is it the photography that attracts you and makes you do the nomadic life?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because it's like chicken and egg, right? Which one's first? But for me, I didn't start photography for a little while. I started traveling, right? And I didn't even like traveling at that time. I grew up on fairly low income family, and my parents was working their ass off, right, to get us by. So when I got job and stuff, all I think about was saving, get nice things, right? Because that's what I didn't get to have when I was a kid. Now 6 years in, well, actually earlier than that, about 2-3 years, I had this bad breakup with my girlfriend at that time, and I didn't like traveling, but I just kind of felt stuck, right? And I was like, I had to go back for my grandma's grandma birthday at that time. And I decided to spend just a few days longer in Bali. So that was my very first solo trip, pretty much. I don't even know if that counts because my friends was there, so I get to hang out with them as well. But since then, I've been to 25 countries, right? Ever since I had that breakup, I have been to 25 countries. And the big changing moment is when I traveled 5 weeks in Europe. It was such an incredible trip. I had a lot of fun, but I just don't have any photo to remember, the experience by. It was just like, it's like that's not it, and that's when I decide if I'm gonna go travel anyway, why not, capture these places like how all of these people capturing it in Instagram and stuff. So I would start thinking, what to get, how can I improve and stuff like that. But the big thing that really, pushed me was when I saw one of the local photographer here. Actually, he's a legend in astrophotography, and I saw his photo, just a panorama of Milky Way curving above one of the sand dunes here in Western Australia. And then I saw that, I was like, I want to be able to, take photos just like that. So ever since then, it was just, everything that I do, it was how I can get there. How can I take this photo? And over time, that kind of just developed, and I realized around 2016, I realized that, if I want to be able to go to all of these places and capture and see all of this beautiful scenery, landscape, right, and capture them with my camera, working full time is not going to cut it, because I'm not going to have the time to do that, right? And mind you, right, at that time, I used to have this calendar on my wall at work. And I used to book like a year in advance. So as soon as the schedule of the flight tickets out, I already know, right? And I would just like use all of the work, the holidays and school holidays and all stuff, and line it up to save all of my my leave. But yeah, that's pretty much how I got to it. And over that, it just kind of developed. Like I fall in love with adventure, start summiting mountains, doing kind of night hikes and stuff like that. And it's just about curiosity of what is that, and you kind of give it a try, and at some point it's either a yes or a no, right? And for me, that's how I curate my life to this point. It's like, okay, well, there's I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm just gonna try it. And then if it's a yes, then I'm gonna keep doing it. If at some point it become a no, then I'm just gonna drop it and move on. And ever since I had that breakup, that's always been my principle. I'm never gonna let life dictate because I want to be comfortable or I'm scared of change. And instead, it's just, well, if it still serves me, if I still like it, then I'll keep doing it. If not, then there is, I have the ability to change that.
Yeah. So I guess it sounds to me like a lot of it is around that control in your life and being able to control your circumstances. That said, you're going into some environments that are quite challenging, and you've experienced conditions on the tops of mountains and Arctic conditions and all the rest of that sort of thing. How much control do you want to have around those elements, and how much does that influence when you pick and choose where to go?
Yeah, it's always hard, right? At the end of the day, it's all about what I want to see and what I want to experience, and everything I'll just try to manage, right? Sure. So kind of rolling back a little bit, all my life, growing up in an Indonesian kind of culture, it's all about control, right? You have to go get good grades. You have to go to school. So when I quit my job, it felt so scary because no one I've ever heard, no one from Indonesia I've ever heard done this, right? Yeah. So it was something new, especially in my family, right? My parents are both doctors and they're, living a very secure sort of progression. Yeah. So when I quit, it becomes about embracing the change, embracing the challenges, embracing the pain, right? So one of the hardest hike that we had was going up this mountaintop because we want to see the aurora. Now, the problem at that time was when I was in Canadian Rockies, we have to go quite high up to see the auroras because usually we're quite further south and we have to see in the horizon, and there is a lot of mountains everywhere. Yeah. So we had to go higher so that we could see the horizon, right? Now, the problem was at that time, it was full of clouds. It was a negative 30-degree winter. Mm-hmm. So then we look at it, we look at different spot. One of the spot that we want to go, like, man, it's all fully clouded. One of my friends just came from there and then kind of step out. I was like pretty disappointed coming back from work, and I look up and I was like, it's clear sky here. Why not just go one of the mountain here? So we ended up just start packing, and then we start skiing up the mountain. I think we started around 10 p.m. We got there around 1, if I'm not wrong. Yep. And yeah, it was one of the most memorable experience and photos that I've ever captured. But coming back to what you say, it's kind of a long way to answer that question. Sure. How do I decide? It's about deciding what you want to see, what you love instead of what you're scared of, and then managing your fear afterwards. And that's the definition of passion. Like when you're passionate about something, you push through and you find the courage to overcome the fear, and you just manage the fear. Yeah. And I think that is the biggest lesson that I've learned from my life and from doing this.
Okay. And do you think it's that fear and that control of the fear that is what motivates you the most creatively?
Yes and no. I mean, it's really difficult, right? And I found this out actually just earlier this year that we need both things. We need certainty and we need change in life, right? Yeah. How much is depend on people's personality. Now, I realized that I think you will see a lot of people are feeling this, right? Especially artists, right? Because we're kind of known with the broke artist mindset and stuff like that. Yeah. And I think that is because when we hustle and try to find income to make us live, right? We can't be creative. Right. Yeah. When we're in a survival mode, we can't be creative. And actually, a good example is like when you see a lion, right? You're not gonna go, where should I go on my next adventure? You're not gonna think like that, but you're gonna think, oh, how do I stay alive, right? Yep. So what drives me is definitely the adventure, the changes, the things that's exciting, right? But I find that I need to have a security as well. And that security is depend for everyone. And, for me, and that's why I like to do a slower trip. So even though I'm nomadic, I like to, kind of base here for 3 months or a year or 2 years or whatever it may be, right? And then move on to the next one. And that kind of give me the security that I need instead of, hopping like every 3 days and stuff. I'm kind of done doing that.
Cool. So what is it that you're really chasing the most in your photography in particular? Less so the adventure side of things, because that's obviously the experiential side, but in terms of your art and creating something out of that experience, what is it that you're really chasing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, experience always comes first, and it's all about capturing the experience and being able to share that to my friends, my family, or my followers, right? And my community. And that is the main thing. So when people say it's like, well, why would you go out? It's such a bad weather. Well, actually, I want to go out and experience that, and being able to portray that bad weather. I think that would be something exciting for me, right? A challenge rather, if it's not easy to take and so forth. But in terms of photography, I think one of the things that is important for me is to find unique perspectives of the world. And it's
Sure.
when I started photography, I think that is one of my goal or my mission is that I want to challenge myself and look beyond the obvious, right? I want to challenge myself and slow myself down to see and observe the things that most people missed out on, right?
Yep.
And I think as photographers, we have the responsibility to share that, because most of the time we are out there observing and seeing and capturing this, while as most people probably only go there once, right? And then they would never go there again. They would go to a different location, but we would go there over and over and over again. So some of the condition that we've captured might never been seen by anyone else.
Yeah. So do you think it's important to, and do you have projects that you work on and goals within those projects? Or do you tend to be a little bit more spontaneous in how you develop your work?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I do have project, but my project revolves around the destination and the experiences,
Yep.
right? So for example, one of my my goal in Canada was to be able to capture aurora and Milky Way from the summits, right? And that become the project, that become the passion.
Yep.
And then there was a time where I wanted to chase, not chase, but explore the glacier and the ice caves and stuff like that. And around that whatever time frame that I have to be able to do that, I would just look and find different places that I can go to be able to find that. So my project are more about the location instead of like, instead of a certain topic or sort of thing. So one of the things that I want to be able to experience next, for example, is to be able to go to Iceland or even go to the 8,000ers mountain top in Nepal one day. That is, like another project kind of thing, so to speak.
Sure. So what are you doing in terms of planning those things? You mentioned that you were, when you were working, booking a year ahead. Now that you're full-time in photography, are you doing things differently? Are you spending as much time planning, or do you spend a little bit less time planning and you might be more spontaneous and you say, all right, well, I feel like going to Iceland next week, let's go.
Yeah, that definitely has changed. I think the planning is more about the responsibilities that I need to do, right? For example, right now, I want to be in Perth because my niece's birthday, the other day, and I want to be with the family. That's probably, one of the things that I want to work around. But the other things is also weather, right? Timing of the year, as well as usually I would plan everything around the Milky Way, because I'm such a big lover of astrophotography, and it's what got me started into photography, right? So everywhere I go, I would look for a composition where I can incorporate the Milky Way. So when I do hiking and stuff like that, I usually look at for the new moon instead of the full moon.
Yeah, right. And how much time would you spend in that planning, I guess, the planning phase of your journeys?
Yeah, the planning is really difficult because I used to be a person that want to plan everything to like the smallest T, right? But that kind of changed. Now I have like the bucket list of that trip. So I want to do this, and that. Yep. And I let everything kind of just flow like water, right? Wherever it goes, whatever cracks, it's fine. Okay. And I don't like to put pressure on myself and saying like, you know what, I'm going to France and I want to be able to see the Eiffel Tower, for example. Yep. So my whole philosophy is that when I travel and when I go on a trip, I have these certain things that I want to see, right? Like everybody else does. But if I find a place or if I stop by a place that I really like, I'm okay to not go to the next one or miss out the next one. Because, there's always next time, right? And it's a good reason to come back. So that is one of the big reason around there is one of the big point around my planning.
Yep.
Um Having said that, when I start planning, the composition and everything, I look into it very detailed in terms of weather, in terms of the lineup with the Milky Way, right? Where it's gonna be, what sort of composition I'll be looking at, and it's never gonna be the same anyway when you get there, because you
Yeah.
get there and then you go like, oh, the mountains actually on a different side, or I miss the AR is not 100% true, or there is no foreground here. So it's a little bit of both, but I find that especially for night photography, it's important to plan it because it's hard to find composition when it's dark. So
Yeah. Yeah.
usually most of my Milky Way shot are, I would pass it during the day and I'll start looking at a few different things, pull out my photo pills, line things up, look at where the composition gonna be, and come back to that spot for the nighttime.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. What's the next exciting project you're planning to get into?
Ooh, I've got quite a few actually, that I'm passionate about is the country where I was born. So I wanted to explore more of Indonesia,
Yep.
especially the places that are a little bit more untouched, right? I
Mm.
mean, for example, Bali, Java is very common. People are going there. I
Yeah,
want
it's
to
a
be able
big
to go.
holiday destination. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, right? And the population as well. It's a big population.
Yeah.
So a lot of the local photographer have been there and so forth. But I'd love to be able to branch out a little bit more and go to more isolated places. But at the moment, I'm kind of focusing on my business right now because the first 2 years I did this, I was basically doing so much adventure that I didn't focus on my business. So that was a problem when it comes to the COVID time. That's when I was kind of like sit down and start thinking, okay, I need to work on my business, so to speak. So yeah, my next project is basically that, but I'm working a lot on other projects as well. So for example, I'm building a travel photography backpack that I'm hoping to release, and I'm hoping to be able to help photographers out there who's struggling to find the backpack that suits their style, right? Um, and I'm also working on a travel sort of trips around Indonesia as well, where we want to go to, like I said earlier, we want to take people to more secluded places,
Yeah.
but we want to also make sure we contribute to the local community and local artists.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to utilize NFT in that sense as well, where we
Okay.
get the local artists, we turn that into NFT, people buy the NFT, and that kind of contribute to the local artists, and then X% go to the local NGO to help their cause. And then, of course, the rest is to keep our business going and do more of this so that we can make more changes to the rest of Indonesia.
Excellent.
But yeah, that's some of the project that I have. Photography wise, Greenland. I think Greenland is high on my bucket list, 100%.
Yeah, I think the opportunities for getting into places like Greenland are started to open up recently, which it's always been somewhere that's been very difficult to get into, or challenging to try and get around. I think so. Yeah, I think that'd be a very interesting little project to get into.
Yeah, Greenland is so I heard or seen Greenland from Paul Ziska. I'm not sure if you
Yep.
know him, but he's one of my mentor. He's one day I went to his event, and then he was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, let's set up a coffee meet," and he showed me everything about Greenland. It's like, "Oh, you should go here, you should go here, and then you take this to go here," and I was like, Man, it's incredible. And those are actually some of the places that I love to visit, like, because not many people have gone there before, right?
Mm.
Not many people have seen them. Like Iceland is beautiful, right? I've seen them over and over again, and I still do want to go there, but I would rather go somewhere that is less untouched and less seen, because my goal is to be able to find that new perspective and be able to show people, a piece of the world that people haven't seen or experienced before.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm interested also in your approach to photography as it relates to the experience, but also how that sort of transcends into art. And you mentioned, being an artist and so forth. Some photographers don't see themselves as artists per se because they're recording and documenting. They're more documentary photographers, and they take what they see. Where do you sit on the spectrum between, where it merges into digital art, or are you more trying to show something that's a very true representation of what you see?
I think I'm a little bit in between, but one thing that I had a lot of think about this actually when I first started is like, what makes people a photographer and what makes people non-photographer. And at the end of the day, it's about the definition that they put around that word, right? I
Mm,
mean, art is something that evokes emotion, right? It
definitely.
could be, I mean, I'm sure you have seen this square, like three squares or whatever with three different colors, and people
Yeah,
call it art because to some people that evoke emotion. It might not evoke emotion to you personally, and you go like, this is ridiculous, right? But other people relate to that and evoke their emotion. So even people who simply capture and document, the scene or an event and so forth, I think it's still an art, right? Because out of those chaotic movement and everything, they are looking for those emotional evoked moments,
mm,
capture them, and also process them in a way that it can relate or evoke, the audience
yeah. The
emotion.
visual impact has to have something that drags you either into the scene or, as you say, promote some kind of. It might be revulsion, but it might also be, oh, that's beautiful.
100%, right? That's exactly right. So for me, I think I like to I create, for example, I take the Milky Way, and most of my photos and Milky Way shots is actually single shot. I don't even do focus stacking, or I do some of them, but I don't do much of them.
Mm,
And one of the main reason about that is because I feel like if I started to create a composite out of, things that you could find on the web and stuff like that, I just become lazy. No, I'll become lazy. And it's like, why bother hiking that mountains? I could just,
that's
do
right.
a composite, right? So one of the motivation for me is just to experience, right? And I think it's important for every photographers to understand that why. I know some people who love to do composites, right? And I have nothing against them. And it's all about why they do that, right? Some people want to create these dreamy images and stuff like that, and I
Mm,
respect that. But when people try to do a composite photo so that they could claim, or they can have this self-right, or people praising them for something that they haven't done, then that's where I feel like that's
yeah,
where the ethical line should be at.
sure.
But yeah, I mean, I alter colors, right? When it's changing, like the white balance and stuff like that,
Yep.
to get it right or to get it more purple and stuff like that. I do a lot of dodging and burning. But in most of my photography are single shot.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting. Are you going into the field with that in mind? And how does one of the things that I'm always interested in exploring is that nexus between the place you are taking your photos and therefore the subject that you're taking, and the technical side of how you're actually taking that photo, and which one dictates to you what you're going to do in any given event?
I always start with the vision. When I first start teaching, and I was like, I kind of have to break down my workflow, right? I come to realize that there are three things that you need to master in photography. First is the vision, second is the tool, and the third is the processing, right? In a nutshell, if you master that, you become a great photographer. So why you start with the vision, right? Because photography at the end of the day is capturing the light, capturing the moment, right? The true definition of photography is capturing the light, right? So with that in mind, to be able to capture a good photo, you need to be able to recognize a good scene, right? And you need to be able to recognize how to capture them. And once you do that, then you can learn how you can use the tool that you have. And this is where it's important, because your tool could be a phone, it could be a compact camera, or it could be a massive DSLR, or it could be a drone, right? And by understanding your tool and mastering your tool, you can get the most out of it. And then you tie that with the post-processing side, where you can either add your own personality to it, right? Have a certain color, a certain way, a certain experience through dodging and burning, right? This is what Ansel Adams is so good, right? You can create an entirely different experience just with dodging and burning. And also to push the limit of your camera. I know that, the more basic your photography, the better you should be at post-processing, because that's how you can get the most out of your photo.
Sure. So how do you convey that feeling of standing on the mountain through your art, through your style? What is it about your style that you think is that communicative element that makes the person viewing it say, "Oh wow, that's definitely Stanley, and that's a place that I recognise, or a scene that I recognise"?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I'm not sure if people can see my photography and they say, go like, well, that's Stanley, but I know there are a few iconic shots that no one ever taken, and I know it was the only composition that that is unique to everyone. That even if you're gonna go through Google and stuff like that, it won't be there. And it's not, again, like for me, it's a matter of creating that scene to create that uniqueness instead of doing that in the post. I know some people have that really recognizable signature. I can say that I don't think I'm there yet, because I do have a lot of interest, and when I look at different things, I was like, I like that a little bit more vibrant, or I like that a little bit more, matte, like not as vibrant. And it all depends on the scenery for me. So if you look at some of my photos, there are a few different, more than a few. I have like a good handful of photos that people can look at it and know exactly that is mine, because I know no one would ever, no one have capture it that way, especially with the moments or the time. So I think that is what is my passion, is actually chasing those moments. And it's one reason why I love to do the single shot as well, because I'm more passionate about chasing the moment instead of creating it, if that makes sense.
Okay. So how do you define success in your photography?
Ooh, that's a difficult question. That's a really good question. How do you define success in photography? That is definitely something that's hard, because everyone have different
absolutely
definition, right?
So what's yours?
But for me, it's always come back to or a color or a condition that is unique to myself, right? That I truly came up with, because I know it's really easy to fall in the trap of Oh yeah, yeah. Person A captured this before in Instagram at this time, at this day, at this season, and it looks beautiful. I want a photo like that, right?
Yeah, sure,
And
sure.
I started with that. That's how I started my
Yeah, well,
photography.
you learn by copying. Otherwise, it's very difficult to go out on your own and develop something from nothing without having seen other work.
100%. But what I didn't know was that that should be the learning curve instead of that's what you should be doing.
Sure,
So
sure.
I thought that's how people do it. You look at what people do and then you capture what they captured and you
Yep.
just go like, yeah, this is mine, which exactly look the same with the next person. So so for me, I always the success, right? Some of the photos that I'm truly proud of is when, for example, this photo, one of my favorite photo is where it was taken in on top of highest volcano in Mount Agung, right?
Yep.
And we hike up in the middle of the night. It was a really good story leading up to it because we there was two different summit. One of them was a little bit shorter on the east side, and one of them, the true summit, is like you kind of go up, you go around the mountain, and then you go another up, and then you get to the summit. So I wanted to go to the true summit, and my friend thought we were going to the other summit. So we're like taking our time, and just before the top, right?
Yep.
She was like, okay, see, it's close. We already see the summit. It's like, that's not the summit. It's like, yes, it is. It's like, no, it's not. And then we look at each other and like, no. It's when we realized we got every, misunderstanding there. But we got there. It was the last season of the Milky Way, the last week of the season of the Milky Way
Yep.
last year. So in 2021, right? So that was the last chance. And the forecast was clouded over, right? I look at it, I studied it, and I realized that it was a low cloud. So we went anyway. And when we got there, we have one of the most incredible condition because we have this beautiful sea of clouds underneath it, and the Milky Way is right above it. And it actually helped a lot because the cloud diffuse the light pollution. So, without the cloud, I won't be able to see the Milky Way that vibrant.
Sure.
So I think one of the proudest photography that I've taken is where I have a great story behind it, where I have a great struggle when I went against every odds there is and still managed to find something different. Because like most people don't want to go out there when the weather's rough or when it looks like it's not going to be a good day. But
Yeah.
actually, you never know until you go out there.
No, that's it. I mean, I think it's almost always worth going out, maybe not to the top of, an active volcano. There's some times when you shouldn't do that. But it's almost always worth going out and getting out into the environment because, you never know what you're going to see. It's always a challenge.
Yeah, and a lot of my photos that is like one of a kind is because of that, right? It was negative 40 degrees and everyone was sleeping, and I was like, I'm gonna go out. There's gonna be something good happening, and I managed to see a light pillars, for example, or
Yeah, sure.
a moon halo or whatever it may be, right? And the harsh condition is actually the things that makes things the one that make things interesting, especially in the landscape photography or adventure photography, because those are the moments that most people, well, actually everyone, rarely seen, right? Because most
That's
people
right.
don't go out during the
They
harsh
go and
condition.
hide.
Exactly. And it's one of the reasons why I love night photos as well. Because
Yeah,
most people are just sleeping, right? So when they
that's
see
right.
that, they go like, wow, can you actually see that? It's like you'd be surprised how much you can see.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to move on. You've got yourself a podcast of your own, and I want to thank you that I was one of your guests recently. Talk to me a little bit about how that started and why you decided to get into podcasting as well.
That's actually a really interesting. It was interesting a story. It was great to have you there. It was one of the most interesting story we had. So How it get started was basically in 2020, I think, during the pandemic. I hit this wall of I'm starting to hate my photography, right? I just get bored
Yeah.
of photography, and I was like, I'm hitting a burnout, basically. Um, and at that time, I was thinking to myself, how does this other professionals does it, right? Like, how do they go through? Like, what struggle they have to go through? So the main reason why I started the podcast was to battle imposter syndrome by sharing other people's journey, right? Because just because you see people having 100,000 followers on Instagram, it doesn't happen overnight. I know it's really easy to see it that way, but man, it's a lot of work. You know, they have to be consistent. They have to post every day. They have to make sure that the post is high quality. The copy, research around hashtags, around, everything, right? So there's a lot of things. Now, with the new era of social media, we got this false perception that everything should happen very quick, right? That you go into Instagram and suddenly you have 10,000 followers. It doesn't happen that way. You have to put a lot of work. So when I started, asking people, other photographers and so forth, when I start asking people, other photographers, and who's been in the industry for a long time, that's when I realized that just because they're very successful today, right, doesn't mean they're not doing anything yesterday. They have been building this over and over and over again. They have been failing. They have been going through all of the challenges that everyone goes through, right? And one day something happened and it makes all the difference, right? And a good example is Kath Simard, right? And I know she's a really great photographer. She have a really unique style, really unique eye as well. Like her vision is just incredible, right? But for a long time, she was struggling. Even in the NFT industry, when she started, people kind of like buy one, buy two, but don't know really, who she is. But one day it just kind of happened and it just exponentially goes, right? She went to one of the most renowned NFT photographer in the space. So I'd like to say that, a lot of this thing is for every struggle that we're going through, every failure, every things that, hard times that we're going through, we're just preparing for our big day. And, when that big day comes, that's when you better be ready, because it will come. If you keep going, if you keep finding your path, after interviewing 46 people now, right? They always find a way. It's just a matter of, are you willing to go through the hardship that come with it?
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's a very important thing, is that, anything worth having requires effort. If everything was easy and handed to you on a plate, then the value that you place on it is almost nothing, because it was easy. Anything that is easy, I'm not saying it's completely worthless, but, it's nowhere near as valuable as those things that you've actually got to strive and struggle for.
100%. And I love getting all this wisdom as well from the top photographers out there, right? And actually my podcast isn't only about top photographers, but also like the newer one as well.
Sure.
I think the cool thing about talking to them is you get to see the inspiration behind it, right? And it can become your own inspiration. So one of the guests that I speak to was my early mentor here in Perth area, and he says something that I've never forget, and something that still drive my passion and my career today, is he always asks, don't ever forget why you start photography, right?
Yeah.
Why you start photography. And that's how you can get out of this imposter syndrome of, if you're in the NFTs area, like not having sales for a long time. If you're in a photography for sales, then maybe that's going to make you stop.
Yeah.
Right? If you're in
Could be in it for the wrong reasons.
exactly, right? If you're in photography for the adventure, man, the adventure never stops. You know, you
That's
just
right.
have to find a different way to make sales and find that money. So then, it's really important. And I got that from my guests. So it's really important to speak to others and understand other people's journey and see how that can affect you.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the business side. So how are you structured? You mentioned you've got a number of things on the boil, like the backpack, and you're into NFTs and so forth. What else are you actually doing in your business and working on? And okay, if there's some secrets, don't tell me, but is there anything that you can share with us that sort of gives people a bit of a sense for how the business is structured, how it works, where the money comes from, and how you keep it ticking over? Because for me, one of the things that I'm really interested in, I'm interested in learning for myself as well, but sharing that knowledge of how people are actually building up their photography businesses, because a lot of people, when they start out, they've got no real idea about what it is that they need to prepare, what they need to, put in place to make sure that their income is always ticking over, and how to diversify their income. And, you've mentioned a couple of things, but I'm really interested in how you structure that to get your business working.
Yeah, it's regardless, I think before we kind of go through this, a lot of people might say, well, doing a photography business is really tough, right? That's one thing that people say. But you also remember, doing any business is tough. Something.
It doesn't matter if you're running a milk bar or a pizza joint, or
exactly. Exactly. So
making
before
craft at home,
100%. Now the question is, which one is worth it? I think that is the biggest question, right? So when I first started my photography, I kind of try everything. I do portraits, I do maternity, I've done real estate, resort. I've tried to be influencer at one point. Basically every photography. I never got into commercial because that was and wedding. That was the two things that I know that I didn't want to get to.
Yeah.
So how do you find income from photography? There are so many different ways to get income from money, right? From photography, right? Yeah. Now the big thing that you should do is like I mentioned earlier, try out a few different things that you think you like, right? And see whether it is as good as you imagine it to be, or is it just, are you just looking at the good things and not considering the bad things?
That's it.
So once you find that out, you try a few different things, and then once you find that out, then stick with it, make it happen, make it sustainable before you take the next thing, right? So if you're in prints, you stick with prints and you keep going. You make an income or whatever goal you want to make from prints, and then you go into the next thing. So that is the main thing. And now for me myself, the thing that I want to focus on is mentorship and teaching, and that's where I do workshops, like 2 days workshop. I do mentorship as well, 3 monthly, 6 monthly. I do one-on-ones if people just have portfolio review that they want to go through, or a certain question. I do that as well. Yep. Or in-person kind of meet up. And that's the thing that I want to focus on. Why? Because that's where I find the most fulfillment on. Now, a lot of people can argue, well, like, you're in Bali, like doing this wedding photography is really profitable. It's like, yeah, man, like there's a lot of things I could do that is good money. But when I quit my engineering career, I told myself that I would never pick a path based on money itself, right? Yeah. It has to be something else that motivates that.
Because you could earn a lot more money in engineering than you can in photography. Easily.
Exactly. Yeah. So, if I were gonna do, something that I'm not gonna enjoy in photography, then I might as well just stop this and go back to engineering and just do photography as my part-time, right? It's no difference in that sense.
That's
So
right.
yeah, like there's a lot of different ways. You can do prints, you can do NFTs, you can do um real estates, right? One of the easiest one to get started is, the thing that people need. So portrait, product photography, real estate. That's usually the easiest one because people genuinely need it, right? When it comes to prints, it's different because it's about emotion. It's about the luxury.
Yeah, so it's a luxury
wanted...
purchase.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of how you have decided to make that move to photography, you talked a little bit about, changing careers from your engineering into full-time photography. How difficult was that decision, and what were you sort of thinking about when you made that decision? What did you weigh up in your mind before you said, okay, that's it?
Yeah, it's definitely the hardest decision that I've ever made. And going back to the culture that I was brought on, that was never on the radar. Like I didn't even know that was possible. So when I wanted to do that, when I have the thought of pursuing that, it was something that not even myself, but most people in my families, my circle of friends ever thought of or know that it's possible. Right? So making that decision of getting that really nice salary from engineering here, working for an aluminium refinery, to start over after, what was that, 29 years was really difficult, because for 30 years or 29 years working towards this level, and I finally got there, and suddenly I want to throw it all away to start something new, right? Now, one of the things that really helped me was this book from Tim Ferriss, right? The 4-Hour Work Week.
Yep.
And one of the things that he said there, just write down the worst thing that could happen, right? And for me, my biggest fear is financially, right? What if it didn't work out, right? What if
you got to feed yourself and house yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. And the answer was simple. I was like, I used to work in Subway, and I used to still, I used to still save up stuff, money to buy, motorbike and luxury items. So I was like, well, it's really not that bad. The worst thing that could happen is just come back to Australia, work, part-time or full-time on Subway, Nando's, or Woolies or whatever. Yep. And, I could look for another engineering job or whatever, right? So once I faced that fear, that biggest fear, then it was an easy decision. It's just a matter of when I'm gonna pull the plug.
Yeah, yeah. So when you decided, what were you putting into place before you pulled the pin? There must have been a bit of a plan to get to that point where you say, okay, today's the day.
Yeah, don't do what I do because I didn't have a plan. I'm going to say what I recommend first, right?
Sure.
I recommend people to start doing it on a part-time basis, right? Start doing this, save up a lot of money to at least sustain yourself for at least 2 years. I think 2-3 years, right? So, and the next thing is to go on mini retirement. That's what Tim Ferriss say. And what he mean by that is like, take a big break. So let's say you want to pursue full-time photography, right? Take like a month break from your full-time job and treat it as if in that month you are the photographer that you want to do, right? Yeah. And see whether or not you enjoy it. If you enjoy it, then right, that's an easy decision. If not, again, you gotta keep finding out what you want to do in the future, right? And it goes with everything. It's not just photography. So I did that, but my whole premise about leaving my work was I want to spend a season in Canada to just go skiing, right? That's one thing. That's a bucket list thing that I have in my life.
Sure.
And I was reaching 30, which was the cutoff for, getting that visa at that time. Now they bump it out to 35. So it was an easy decision. When I was 29, I put on the visa. I thought it was gonna happen. They're gonna come back in about a year or so. They come back in about 3 months and say, well, you got a year before you can come into Canada.
Yep, you got
otherwise you won't. Yeah. So from there, then I just worked backward. I know I wanted to explore Indonesia a little bit more, and I want to drive around Australia with my 4-wheel drive at the time. So I just work backwards. So I need to be in Canada at that time. How long I want to be in Australia to drive around, and how long I want to be in, and that is the time that I was gonna quit. So I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where to go. I didn't even know anyone who do this full time in the photography industry, right?
Oh, wow.
Paul Ziska was the very first mentor and person who does this full time as like an adventure travel sort of things.
Yeah.
So I didn't know anyone to ask and stuff like that. So first 2 years I was just rolling around trying to figure things out, not knowing even what I could and should do.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's been a journey for sure. It's crazy.
Sounds like taking that spontaneous jump as being good for you, though. How are you feeling about the move now, a couple of years on?
Yeah, I mean, the money comes and goes, right? And the thing is, I don't base it on money. I always find a way to find that money when I need it, and it's been okay so far. I can't say that I'm not where I want it to be. What I'm doing and what I want to do is not fully sustainable yet. So in some cases, I still inject finance from my saving and so forth.
Yep.
But the first year, when I left that refinery for the last time, I have never felt life in my life, right? I was just like everything lifted. Like I don't have this pressure. I don't have this judgment from, I just like, wow, like I'm a whole new person.
You're your own boss.
And the
Nobody
first
can sack you.
Yeah. It's crazy, right? It's scary and it's exciting at the same time,
Absolutely.
I'm actually living my own life instead of living what the society and my parents think I should do. So I think based on that alone, it's already worthwhile. And the amount of experience that I get to experience in the first year alone doing this is priceless. I would never be able to be able to capture experience and see some of this thing that I have captured during my trip. And it's an experience. One thing, just to finish this up, when one big question that really motivated me was from Steve Jobs. And he say, if today were the last day of your life, would you do what you're about to do today? And I used to have that written on my bathroom mirror and read it every single day until, I kept reading it and the answer was no, until, I start changing things and it started changing. It's like, yeah, I would do that, So I think that's really important. If you're not sure what you're going to do, if you're not sure that you should or shouldn't do it, just ask yourself, if today were the last day of your life, would you do what you're about to do today?
Perfect. I think that's amazing advice. One of the questions that all artists have is, how do you price your work? How do you go about pricing your work?
Oh, pricing is really difficult. I think I'm still struggling with pricing. At the end of the day, one of the best advice that I've ever gotten was, what are you, right? A lot of people say, hey, don't undervalue yourself. Don't undervalue yourself. That is very true, right? Do not undervalue yourself. But at the same time, you need to believe that you are at that value. Okay, because if you were going to sell your price at, let's say, let's just use portrait for example, right?
Yep.
If you're going to charge people $1,000 an hour, right, and you feel and you believe that your charge rate is $200 an hour, they will not purchase it. Why? Because they will see hesitated when you put out the offer. You don't have the confidence. You don't truly believe that the value that you are given is at that price.
Yeah.
So then people then, it's like, I can't make money off this. I'm struggling to sell and stuff like that. Well, that's because you don't truly believe on your own value. And, if you don't believe on it, how can you expect your customer to believe in it?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So I agree with that sentence, right? Don't undervalue yourself, but at the same time, you need to build up to the value. If you want to value yourself higher and you don't believe that you're not there yet, then you need to convince yourself first, right? I'm not saying that you have to charge lower, but you need to do whatever it takes to convince yourself. Maybe to charge lower, right? To friends and family, maybe do a tryout just for free. Maybe do things like meditation and stuff like that, right? To change the way you think, to change your belief. But whatever it is, you need to make sure that you believe in it.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. It's really good to, I guess, take that belief and perception of where you are in the market and use that as a benchmark. I think that's really good advice.
Yeah.
In terms of shooting, you've been, as you say, to 25 countries all around the world. What's your favourite place to shoot? And have you been there yet?
29 countries actually now. So 25
29.
before I started photography, but now I'm on 29. And my favorite so far is Canada, 100%. The Canadian Rockies is a playground for people who love adventures. And during the summer, you go hiking, you chase the auroras, you chase the Milky Way. And during winter, you go backcountry snowboarding, you snowboard. And also, the harshest weather, like I said, produce the best photos, So I have a lot of photo from my library where it's just truly one of a kind. Not only because I know how to capture it and use the camera, but also I was out on a time where people, most people don't want to go. So, whereas if you go, for example, in Indonesia, right, in Bali, right, that is a lot more difficult because a lot of the places, the weather is about the same. It's just a matter of, is it going to rain or not, right? A little bit hotter, a little bit colder, but it doesn't have the snow. It doesn't have the change of color. It doesn't have the summer color, Whereas in Canada, it changes so much. Every season is different. And I don't think you could ever get bored there because there's so many things to do. There's so many things to explore, even from one, area or one mountain. So far it would be Canada. But yeah, I don't know where I'll end up in the future. But interestingly, right, one of my favorite road trip is Australia. So it really depends what you're asking for photography and adventure, Canada so far, but road trip is Australia so far.
Fantastic. How far would you travel each year?
Sorry, say that again.
How far would you travel each year?
It depends. I don't have a set things. It's just a matter of what I want to, where I want to go, what I want to see, right? If it's worth it, and if I feel like it's worth the experience, then I would go. But like I said, I prefer to just take it slow and just stick on one place. So, for example, when I was in Canada, I was in the same place for about 1.5 years, and the main reason was because there's so many to explore that even in 1.5 years, I'm nowhere close to what I want to explore, right?
Yeah, sure.
for example, now in Indonesia, right, in Bali, right, it's a little bit smaller island, but there's still a lot of place that I want to explore that I haven't gone. And because I'm focusing more with the business side, then the time is a little bit restricted. So I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how or as long as the money allows, it doesn't really matter how far or how rough it is. If there is an experience that I want to get out of that, then I would go out there and chase it.
Yeah, great. What have you learned about the world through photography?
That everything is beautiful in its own way. I think that is the biggest thing that you can. It's just it all comes back to judgment, right? We are grown up with this judgment and labels, like you're a landscape photographer, you're a portrait photographers, you're an adventure photographers, and we do need labels so that we can identify.
You need to describe what you're doing to somebody, yeah.
100%, but like we don't want to judge other people. And one of the things that I really don't like is this argument of composite are cheating, or single shot is better. It's like there is no better, there's no right or wrong. It's just a matter of what is right for you. That is the important part.
What's your artistic choice? Yeah.
But exactly, but you don't need to judge other people for your own decision, right?
No.
I mean, if you want everyone to be the same, just think about like a MacBook, for example. Everything look the same, and it's not gonna be interesting, right?
Yeah, it becomes boring really quickly.
The things that makes 100%, the things that make life interesting is our personality, our differences. So I think it's important that we can embrace that and have an open mind. Just because they're doing it differently doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yeah, totally. What's your worst photography experience?
Oh, that depends. But I think the worst one that I've ever had was when I dropped my 5D Mark IV. I got 2470 2.8 L series on that. And I went on top of Mount Agung, and at that time I just recovered from injury, so I wasn't sure how much I could carry yet, so I just keep it light. I got one camera, two lens, and one tripod. Yep. So I was doing a time lapse from the crater with my 6D and 1635, and I wanted to do this self-portrait, but I only have one tripod. So I put it on top of this rock, and I kind of wedge it with another rock so that it's level and stuff like that. Do a time lapse and kind of walk around to the edge of the crater and do my my self portrait. But when I walk back, the wind just picked up, and there was a really massive wind. It knocks my camera over. It drops about 3 meters cliff. And it rolled down. So it drops down, and when that happened, everything kind of just slowed down, right? And I was like, what is that? I look at it, and it's like, no, is that my camera? And it hits the ground. And I was like, that is my camera. And it just kept rolling. And I was like running. I was like, no. And I was like, I thought it never gonna stop because it was like rolling. And then at some point it kind of slowed down, and then it got rolling again. And it must have been about 30-50 meters down where I was standing until it stopped. So I walked all the way down there, picked up the camera. It was an error. I unclipped the lens, look at it, clip it back on, and it was good as new. And I was like, whoa. Wow. So that was incredible, but my heart skipped that day.
I can imagine.
Yeah,
amazing. I guess a testament to the build of the Canon gear to that it actually survived the fall.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like the newer one, the mirrorless, might not survive that because all the electronics and stuff. But that camera is crazy. I've dropped it three times really badly. One in New Zealand where I was like skipping on these big rocks, boulders, and I missed one and I fell because I was holding like a tripod and a camera on one end. I fell camera first, hitting, the rock.
Oh, no.
And that was fine. A change of filter. And the second one was on Cape York, the northernmost part of Australia. And there was another big gush of wind. Tripod went all the way down, hit lens first to the rock. The lens was fine. And then this one. But having said that, last year when I went to Nepal, that lens actually failed. So I'm still surprised that it goes through all that. And
that's incredible.
Kind of, okay, but yeah, it did finally give up.
You talked a little bit about your process in terms of finding compositions and so forth. What things are you looking for in terms of that, and what do you do when you turn up to a location? You've obviously got a bit of a workflow, or do you just sort of let the landscape speak to you and you work your way around it?
Yes. One of the things that I always told my mentee is slow down, right? And observe.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about it, the thing that we capture is the things that we see with our eyes, right? Now, our brain and our eyes is the most advanced photography ever. Most advanced camera ever, right? When you see it, it recognizes it. Oh yeah, that is beautiful. But because it happens so quickly, you kind of have to slow down and reverse engineer it and work and think about what actually makes it beautiful. And then you can use your camera to translate that. So next time you go on a trip, you walk around somewhere and you kind of stop and then you kind of look, it's like, oh, that kind of, attract me. There's something about it that I really like. Just slow down a little bit and think about what attracts it. Yeah. It might be the colors, it might be the shape, it might be the layers. And all of this is a composition, part of a composition technique that you could put together.
Yeah.
Right. I think in my masterclass, there's about 4. I break it out to 34 that you could put together and create what psychologically we think are beautiful. So once you recognize that, then think about what is the story that you want to tell and how can you capture it with your camera in order to portray what you see, what you feel, and what you want to tell to the audience. So I think that is the biggest thing, because with the camera nowadays, a lot of them, they're so advanced. You don't need to work too much with it, right? But the biggest thing that will set your photography apart with 10 million other people out there is how you see the world and how you translate that into your photography.
Yeah, great. How about post-processing? Are you one to come back from a trip straight to the computer, upload, get into editing, or do you let it gestate and marinate for a little while and get into it a little bit later?
Yeah, post-processing is another thing. I used to not like post-processing, but the more I do it, the more I love it, because it's like experiencing it twice, right? You take a photo of it and then you see it and then you export it. So with the post-processing, I usually it depends. I love to go straight to it. I get excited when I get home, I upload it, and I usually filter out. So I would go through it and find my favorite one.
Yep.
And edit those two. Just because I edit, the 2, the 3, or the 5, whatever handful that I really like, doesn't mean there are no good photos apart from that. So usually I come back a little bit later when I have time. But one of the things that I really enjoy is watching a movie, a series, or whatever, right? So technically not watching, because the attention is on your screen and editing. But yeah, I like to run that on the background and then edit at the same time. I just find a lot of peace in that. I don't know why. So Yeah, I just got a new MacBook Pro, so I'm excited to test this out and see, because my old one giving me so much trouble and lags when I edit. I got like 230,000 photos on my library so far, so
Wow.
it really struggles.
I gotta admit, it is one of the reasons why I don't use Lightroom. I have so many images that I know that the database that it creates is going to be almost as heavy as the images. I know that's not true, but it feels that way. And so I actually don't use Lightroom at all, simply because I don't want to have that database set up taking up space for one thing, but also when you load Lightroom into your memory on your PC, a lot of people don't realize a lot of that database is actually being cached into your RAM. And so you end up with that being a bottleneck for actually processing, because then that leaves less RAM for processing the images that you actually want to process. And I know there's some things going on in the background to swap stuff out and everything, but it can actually have exactly that problem where your older machines in particular are starting to slow down unless you've got like 64 gig of RAM or 124 gig of RAM. You're going to end up running out of space.
Yeah, 100%. There are things around it. Like you could limit the cache. But the other thing that you talk about with the size of the file, you could actually not create preview or smart preview.
That's right. There are ways of doing it.
Yeah. But I actually like the smart preview because I'm carrying like 4 different. So my photos are spread out into 4 different hard drive, 5 terabyte hard drive, because they're all full. So being able to edit without connecting my hard drive is a big plus. So I'd rather take that hit and, have I think it was 300 gigabyte of smart preview. It's crazy.
Wow. So when you are editing, what are you doing to your images? Are you lots and lots of layers and lots of fancy edits, or are you fairly minimalistic?
A little bit of both. It really depends on the photo as well. For me, I try to do everything on Lightroom as much as possible, right? And then I need to take it out, and I export it to Photoshop. And then when you save it, it kind of import it back to Lightroom. That's one of the things that I like about the system. But usually I only edit on Photoshop when I do luminosity masking. So when there is a massive dynamic range that, especially on the highlights and stuff that I want to recover, because when you shoot sunset and sunrise and so forth, usually the color get washed out because of that dynamic range. So using that luminosity masking, you could bring that color back in for that brightness alone, not for the whole photo. But in most cases, I do everything on the Lightroom. Most of the stuff that Lightroom have is enough to be able to edit. So I don't I don't work too much with editing. I think a lot of things that the things that I do a lot in Lightroom is the selective tool. I like to dodge and burn and create an experience in my photography, like where it goes, what I want them to see first or notice first, and what I want them to kind of experience next. That is the one that I always think about when I edit my photo.
Yeah, cool. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing photographers right now?
In terms of just photography, or like in doing full-time photography?
No, just in photography in general.
The biggest challenge, there is a couple of things, right? I think the biggest challenge is that people are. So I got this ebook that called The Forgotten Secret of Photography, and it's basically talking about how we forget that photography is about what you see.
Yep.
Right. Most people get so caught up on the gears and having the latest gears, the latest this, the latest that, but never work and sharpen the way they see the world, the way they visualize things. So I think with the instant culture that we have right now, one of the biggest challenge is the appreciation of how important our visual and our vision are, because people just expect that expensive camera, expensive phone can just capture it for you. Well, it's at the end of the day, like my camera is sitting on a backpack. It doesn't go out and take its own photo.
That's right.
You still have to take it out. Still have to point at the things that you want to take photo. But yeah, so with that in mind, I think that is the biggest struggle and challenge in photography. And I think most people don't realize that.
Great. What's the future of photography?
Oh, this is interesting, isn't it? I mean, you start looking at AI and stuff like that. And to me, it all comes back to why you start photography, right? That's why that question is so important. A lot of people go to AI, and a lot of people say it's like, well, actually my uncle said that in one of our group chats, like, look, like this beautiful landscape is like using AI, like you don't even go out there. I was like, well, that's great, but I didn't take photo because I want a beautiful photo. I actually want to it's not like I want an aurora photo.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I could
it's not like I want an aurora photo.
I could ask
Journey
to make me a seascape, but it doesn't put the sand between my toes and the water flowing around my legs.
100%, right? I mean, it's like, I like racing motorbike, so I'll just buy a VR
video,
and sit on my sofa. It doesn't work like that. The experience is different. And it's the same with the phone as well. A lot of people say, DSLR is going to be obsolete. Well, people are still shooting film. It's not always about the photo. It's about the experience you get from taking the photo. So more than ever, I think it's important that people understand and remember why they start photography in the first place, because otherwise they'll get sucked into this media and idealism that people should be this way, should be that way, and so forth.
Yeah, totally agree. So are there any photographers out there that you think I should be talking to?
Paul Zisco.
He's on my list.
Yeah, he's such a humble person. He's a really good person, and he's a great photographer. And he is one of the photographer that I can look and see that I want to strive to be, right. Yep. One of the reasons why is because he go through just basically most of the principle that I say today about going out there. It doesn't matter what the condition are, right? He can spontaneously look at different things and appreciate different things that most people doesn't look at. One good example is like when people go to Canadian Rockies and go to this popular lake called Abraham Lake. People only go there for the bubbles, right? But he would like go out there and find these crazy ice features or crazy shapes or textures and just capture it. And you go like, why didn't I think of that? Or why didn't 10 million others think of that? And one other thing is that he has such a positive and inspiring voice as well in his message and journey and photography. So if there's one person, I mean, there's a lot of people that I can recommend, right? The easiest way is just going through the podcast list. But Paul Zisca is one of the person that I truly admire and I truly respect in this industry. And he always try to give back. He does a lot of causes for ice conservation and stuff like that, because he also loved going to the ice caves and glacier and so forth. So I think that would be the person.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I got one more question for you, and it's for some of my listeners, the most important one that I ask. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
I don't like pineapple, so that's an easy answer.
How could you not like pineapple?
I'm horrible. I'm such
you come from a tropical island.
I don't like fruits, and I don't like vegetable. That's how horrible my diet is. And I used to grew up on instant noodles for 10 years or something. All I ate was just instant noodles, and it's probably why I'm so short, right?
Could well be. Well, thank you very, very much for taking the time to talk to me today, Stanley. It's been absolutely wonderful getting to know you better and getting to know how you do what you do. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, I appreciate it, actually. Thank you very much for letting me share some of this, because most of the time I'm where you're sitting and, get to ask the question instead. But I love what you're doing with the podcast. It's really incredible to see a lot of the speakers and sharing their journeys and stuff like that. So I'm really enjoying this. For most people who want to, join the Wicked Hunt, so to speak, and my journey in photography, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Vero, as well as Facebook, and it's just at the Wicked Hunt, WICKEDHUNT, and the name actually come back to that whole notion why I do photography. The photography is not the main thing. It's the awards that I get when I go hunt for this wicked photos and wicked moments, I suppose, right? That's why it's called Wicked Hunt. But I got a website as well on the Wicked Hunt. But if you want to, chat, if you want to talk, if you want to say hi, Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, it's probably the best to just send me a DM. My DM is open, and I might not be able to get to you right away, but I always reply to everyone's DM.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Stanley. Oh, and you mentioned your backpack. Any date for when that could be due? Is it next year, the year after, or is it still too early to say?
No, it's very exciting. I've got to very close now. We've got into the 5th prototype now. It's crazy. But we're hoping to release to have this ready this year and release 20 exclusive backpack for the founding members, right? And we're looking for people who are truly believe on our journey and what we want to make out of this vision. And what you get for being a founding member is you're basically gonna be grandfather into what we're doing, and you will get to be exclusive. You'll get exclusive access to everything that we're gonna do in the future. You get exclusive price, as well as all the benefits that gonna come in the future, as well as an early bird price that comes with it. Now, for founding members, we'll also personalize the backpack, so it's gonna be like a patch that you could put whatever engraving you want in there, whether it's your photography name, your name, and so forth. But at the end of the day, what we're hoping is to be able to help photographers out there to carry more of their stuff, right, their gifts into adventures, while minimizing having few different backpacks, like hiking backpacks, camera backpacks, and so forth, and having the comfort. I think that is one thing that I can't find from most photography backpack, is that comfort when you take it into a different adventures and so forth. So the brand is called Two Red Tabs. We haven't even done anything yet in there. We've been focusing so much on the backpack itself.
Yep.
But if that's something that you're interested in, you can, get in touch with me and ask questions. And at the moment, for the 20, actually do a one-on-one Zoom meeting with them, showing them the exact features and get any feedback that they have or any objection and so forth from that backpack. But they get like a personalized one-on-one meeting with me to kind of see what the backpack and the experience like. But
Fantastic.
I appreciate you asking that. Thank you very much.
No problem. I didn't want to leave the question unanswered in people's minds about when they could get hold of them.
Oh, that's fantastic.
All right. Well, thanks again, Stanley.
Thank you very much, Grant. I very much enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully we get to meet and shoot together in in the near future.
Absolutely, that'd be fantastic. Really look forward to it. Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Vero, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.